We are going to be talking about fasted training and CrossFit and strength and more high intensities. Okay, so we've kind of touched on aerobic training before in previous videos. You know, we talked about low and slow and how that can be really beneficial for endurance training. But, you know, we all like a bit of strength, we all like a bit of CrossFit. So, you know, if the only option is to kind of train fasted, then how are we going to approach this? What do we need to be focusing on doing? And Luke, you've been doing a bit of reading on this subject and got some really kind of key points that you know we just spoke about just off the video there, that hit us with a few of these knowledge bombs, because it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, so I recently kind of stumbled across a couple of papers, both from the same lab, carried out a year apart, and they were looking into the impact that a pre-training carb meal, so breakfast basically, has on performance in resistance training. So they were looking at squatting, and they were looking at bench pressing, and they were looking at, okay, between these groups of kind of people that have had carbs, people that have had just water, and then in the later one, people that had something they thought was carbs, but was actually nothing. And they looked at their performance across like bench press and squats and how many reps they could complete, how much volume. And so in the first one, they were just looking at breakfast and no breakfast, so just water. What they found was, hey, lo and behold, the breakfast group performed better than the non-breakfast group. But they then thought, maybe that's not true. Maybe there's a bit of placebo effect here. You know, this non-breakfast group was hungry all the time. So this second one, what they did was they added another group, which was another sort of breakfast group, but they kind of tricked people. And what they used sounds disgusting. They were like, hey, we're going to use a semi-liquid meal with xanthan gum, sort of stuff that was basically designed to taste the same as the carb group, but with pretty much 0 calories. So it was essentially designed for them to think that they'd had carbohydrates when they'd had like 0 calories. And then there was the water group. And the results kind of agreed with the last one. So the water group performed worse. Feelings of hunger were higher in the water group, but the group that had carbohydrates and the group that thought they had carbohydrates both kind of performed the same. That was still up there. So even though the substrate availability in the kind of non-carb group was the same as the water group, they performed much higher, which kind of led to this question of, hey, is it all in the head? And they kind of drew this conclusion that, hey, the groups that went into training feeling hungry kind of got in their own head a bit and performance probably decreased. Whereas if you go into training, so like a lot of people that train fasted are so used to it, they're not hungry when they go into the training. And resistance training isn't necessarily going to suffer because of that, is what this was saying. Like, hey, it could be all in your head. So for example, me, I love carbohydrates before training. And I sometimes feel that if I haven't had like a carb meal before I go for a training session, that I'm going to train worse and kind of get in my head. And this kind of just added weight to the fact that it would be in your head, that in terms of the factors of fatigue and resistance training, it's only partially to do with substrate availability. And if you're not hungry and you're used to it, you're still fine, basically, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I really do, because it's something that, you know, we see a lot in gyms, you know, maybe kind of people halfway through the session, almost just drifting through the session and, you know, thinking about the bagel post-workout and, you know, worrying about food. And like I say, that impacts performance. Whereas if someone is either adverse or trained, you know, their body into be like, okay, I train fasted, I know I can perform well. It's almost that, like, I know I can get through the session, you know, and look, you're not going to run out of fuel in a CrossFit session. Don't worry about it. But it's still like that massive, massive psychological element about hunger, you know, perceived hunger and how you're going to perform. And that study for me is so wicked, because it's something that I think commonly, you know, people worry about. If I train fasted and I maybe haven't been, and I'm doing CrossFit strength side of it, you know, more kind of that based training, I need fuel. Whereas actually, you know, if you've adequately eaten the day before, maybe you're coming off of a rest day, trust me, you're going to have enough glycogen, or you're going to have enough, you know, fuel in the tank, unless you're following ketogenic or carnivore, but don't worry about them lot. You're still going to have enough fuel to get through that session. And it's just like, say, that more psychological element of having something pre-workout. I think that's so good. So that's really, you know, wicked. So what can people do? Can they have, like, you know, should they be using like a Nocco, a coffee? You know, can they be using something that's quote unquote kind of a placebo just to kind of get through, you know, their session in the morning?
Definitely. And I think when you're looking at kind of Noccos and stuff like that, you've got a little added bonus from the caffeine, and then obviously the kind of BCAAs in there. It's a very, very rare occasion where BCAAs could be of benefit there as well, in terms of like trying to reduce muscle protein breakdown. But definitely kind of just that burst in your head. And I know some people that almost, it becomes amplified, that, you know, you get these kind of people that cannot train without a knockout, and it's like, well, you can, but hey, if it helps you train in a fasted state, have at it. But yeah, it's important to kind of note, obviously, that this is with regards to that resistance training, and from a performance perspective, we know that, hey, for high intensity interval training, that sort of thing, performance probably will suffer in a fasted state, as opposed to sort of the strength and the hypertrophy training that we're talking about here.
Yeah. So the strength side of things, if I'm doing resistance training fasted in the morning, you know, you're fine.
Yeah. Unless you get in your own head about it.
Yeah. So if I'm doing CrossFit, if I'm doing like whatever, a good long EMOM or an AMRAP, or, you know, really intense session, and some of these, you know, workouts, especially kind of home workouts or whatever, they're quite voluminous. Like, you know, there's no real rest, you know, we're at it. You know, that's when I maybe need to approach it in terms of having something pre-workout in terms of a carbohydrate, if I want to perform at my best.
Yeah. So it's kind of one of your values, obviously, which I like, is, hey, train. And if, you know, you're used to training fasting, and you don't want to force yourself to eat something. If you force yourself to eat something, you're going to feel sluggish and not train, then hey, you've shot yourself in the foot there. But yeah, you can kind of think about, you know, what these CrossFit sessions are as well. Because, you know, if you're doing a 40-minute EMOM, but your heart rate's not necessarily going to get raised much, and it's just movement based and skill based, then hey, you could get some of the aerobic benefits from fasting that we've mentioned before. But if you know that it's going to be intense, that your heart rate's going to be jacked up, that you're going to be dead on the floor, we know that, hey, the primary energy system there is going to be anaerobic glycolysis. The substrate for that is carbs. So give yourself some carbs and find a way to do that kind of fits in with you. So it could be as easy as having, you know, a coconut water and a banana. That's something that we have on the PH meal plans, that sort of stuff, where it's like, hey, that's easy to digest. That's easy to take in. If anybody feels like that sits heavy on their stomach, then I might have some questions about kind of their stomach there. But something that...
Dried fruit, coconut water, a bit of hydration side of things in there, like Luke's nailed it there. Like, you know, using a bit of liquid nutrition pre-workout, it's perfect, isn't it? But when we talked about kind of micro periodization before, it turns across the week, you know, and I think that's a really important thing, guys, to be like, look, if you're just following your, you know, your box's programming, you know, just train. Don't worry about things too much. Just train regularly. But then if you do want to kind of, you know, get the most out of, you know, fasted training, and then, you know, picking and choosing, doing fasted training with the more low and slow, or the longer kind of slower and more less intense sessions. Or you could scale it, you could take more rest periods in between, you know, the AMRAPs, or, you know, or whatever, to maintain like a slightly lower heart rate. So you're working on the correct energy system to augment that correct adaptation. If you are constantly just going all in all the time, high intensity, you know, then you really need to be thinking about making sure that your carbohydrate intake is adequate across the day, but also maybe then adding in some pre-workout. So, you know, Luke's talked about it before, maybe having 2 sessions or 3 sessions a week fasted, where it's slightly lower intensity, or what we call adaptive. So you're focusing on, you know, working on the machinery in your body. And then there's maybe 2 or 3 sessions where you're like, my performance. So that's when I make to fuel the tank, and maybe put a little bit of carbohydrates in, you know, in before that, to help my body, to give it the fuel source that it requires. So guys, I hope that kind of helps. You know, if you're looking at strength, it doesn't matter too much, because it's probably more psychological and you know, that sort of thing. But if you are doing the more kind of workout side of things, CrossFit side of things, then using carbohydrates, you know, at certain times of the week is really going to help kind of, you know, maximize your performance. Hope that helps. Luke, we good?
Yeah, we're good. Spot on there.
Fantastic stuff, mate. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Pop any comments below. Pick this man's brains, because got a lot of knowledge to give. So if you've got any questions on fasted training, you know, maybe kind of just let us know what your schedule is, and we can help you out and guide you in the right direction. But Luke, top man, thank you very much, buddy.